Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet, and this is a new episode of Wojennik TV. Some time ago I have shown you the unboxing of Deep Madness, and today I would like to present you the review of this monumental title. Deep Madness was published by Diemension Games thanks to two very successful Kickstarter campaigns. The first one was launched and finalized in 2018, and it raised nearly $1,400,000. The second one, launched in 2019, accumulated not less than $800,000. So two very huge campaigns with great success. The game, thanks to it, was published with a lot of additional components, but during this review I will be showing you only the elements inside of the core game. The other elements, which are part of additional expansions, will be shown during other videos. The game is a cooperative game, which is for 1 to 6 players, so it is absolutely solitaire suitable. It is for players aged 14 or rather 16 years old or higher, and the time of play is somewhere between 90 and 120 minutes, but it can take a lot more time if during gameplay you think a lot, if you take time discussing your future actions, so sometimes games can drag even to 4 hours. The designer of this game is Roger Ho, and during this review I would like to show you the game, I would like to then explain how it works, and at the end I would like to explain also what I believe are its strong and a little bit weaker points. To summarize what the game is all about, I would like just to explain that the game is set in an underwater facility called Kadath. This underwater facility was, what the official version says, created in order to extract some natural resources from the sea's bottom. But during those works, the researchers, the miners, found something bizarre, found something strange, and the scientists decided to explore what this finding was. The effect was a disaster, because during this game, which is a sci-fi horror game, we will be playing as investigators, arriving at Kadath facility and discovering that this mining facility had been totally changed by some mysterious powers. The miners, the employees are all gone, are somewhere or either dead or hidden. The corridors, the tunnels are changed, are full of blood, full of human flesh, so something was wrong. Our goal will be not only to survive, but also to discover what happened at Kadath facility. So this is the setting, and now let's take a look at the components of this game, then the mechanics, and at the end the strong and the weaker points of Deep Madness. Let's go! This is Deep Madness in all its glory. So first of all, I would like to show you how the components of this game look. Then I would like to briefly explain how this game works. Now, what you're seeing right now is scenario 1 during play, a scenario in which our investigators are trying to restore the oxygen circulation in the underwater facility of Kadath. Each player will have, first of all, their own miniature representing their adventurer, their investigator, and we have 6 of them. Each of them has their own unique miniature, and with this miniature, of course, a character card associated. Each of those characters has their own name, their own background, some special abilities, also some parameters, a health parameter, also a sanity parameter, an escape level, and also some of them have starting equipment. During the game we will gather additional equipment. The maximum of items that we can have at any time is 4. If we have more, we have to discard or trade them with our companions. We can play this game solitaire, we can play this game with 2, 3, 4, 5 or even 6 players. If we are using fewer than 6 characters, we will be using additional tokens, which will increase the number of our actions that we will be able to make during each turn. So as you can see, each character has also their own special small card, which will be used to track turn order, because before the game starts we will have to assemble the devour track, the turn track order, which will first of all indicate the number of turns which will be played during such a scenario, with some symbols which will indicate if a turn will be a classical devour turn during which some terrifying things happen, or some specific events associated to the scenario. The turn order will be determined randomly at the game start. As you can see, if we are using less than 6 investigators, there will be also some blank cards. But underneath those investigator cards, we can see the monster cards. And this order of monsters will not change. The types of monsters will be randomly chosen before the game starts, and each of them is, as you might expect, also a monster which is represented by its own set of miniatures. So the miniatures will be what is the prettiest thing in this game, because we get really a lot of them and they are very, very detailed, very pretty and horrifying at the same time. As you can see, each of them has unique sculpt, and each of them will be associated to one of the monsters represented on the card. We have smaller monsters, we have epic monsters such as this one. Their level, their capabilities and the difficulty to beat them will be different, because each monster will have a specific set of parameters. A horror parameter indicating how terrifying this monster is, a health parameter, an armor parameter, also the number of damage points that it can inflict in case it attacks an investigator. Also, they will have a set of actions which they will be making during their own activation. Before the game starts, we have to assemble the playing area, which will be constructed from playing tiles. We receive bigger tiles, square tiles, which are divided into sectors, and smaller rectangular tiles, which will be used to represent corridors or to represent some smaller chambers, because this is the underwater facility of Kadath, as you can see, which will resemble a dungeon or a labyrinth through which we will have to pass. In this scenario, this is scenario 1, we will be trying to gather additional clues which will help us to restore the oxygen circulation in the entire complex. So we will have to travel through this complex from one side of the board to the other in order to restore this oxygen circulation. On this board we will have different information. We will have, as I said earlier, chambers on which some tokens will be placed. For instance, flooded tokens, because some parts of the complex have been flooded, and we will have to use oxygen to act in those chambers. So each player will also receive an oxygen disc on which we will be tracking our oxygen level. Each time we want to make an action in a flooded space, we have to spend one oxygen unit in order to act. If this oxygen level is below 0, we will be rolling dice, because we will get some dice in Deep Madness, and if we do not roll a success, which is a 5 or a 6, we will be losing health. This level can further deteriorate, and ultimately, if we do not come to a chamber which is not flooded, where we can take some air, we can even die. So as you can see, the board will be constructed in accordance to what is set, to what is written in the scenario description, but we will be also playing some random elements. First of all, on some tiles we'll be placing the spawn markers. Those will be the small red markers which will indicate that in such a sector new monsters will be appearing each turn. Additionally, we will be placing devour markers which all will have negative impact on us if we end our activation on such a space. For instance, we can lose health, we can get madness, we can decrease our parameters, etc. So those are nasty things, and we should avoid ending activation on the most terrifying of them. Now, each scenario will have their own objective, but one objective is always the same. We have to survive. One of the losing conditions in Deep Madness is losing one of the investigators. So we will have to closely cooperate, and the death of any one investigator participating in the game means everyone loses instantly. So we have to survive. Each of us has to survive. The losing condition can be different, but it can also happen if the time runs out, because there will be a certain number of turns. If we do not accomplish the main objective by the game's end, we also lose. Now, I have shown you some elements. We get also some additional dice, we get some tokens which will be used, but we are also receiving a lot of cards, and there will be quite many of them, because 3 big decks of madness cards, which will be those terrifying things that can happen to us if we accumulate too much madness tokens. As you can see, they will, for instance, make us spawn a monster on our place or lose some health, etc. We get consciousness cards, which will be the rewards attributed when we manage to destroy a monster and we do not have sanity tokens at the same time. Those will grant us some benefits, for instance enabling us to heal madness. And finally, the search deck, in which we will find some additional and very useful gear or equipment, for instance shotguns or ore cutter, crystal clarity, electric rods. So some weapons, both melee weapons and also ranged weapons. They will have very easy to learn parameters: the range, the number of dice thrown during an attack, the minimum number which we have to roll in order to score a hit, and the number of damage that we inflict during such an attack. Melee weapons will not have range, only 3 parameters, but we can attack each opponent on our space. Ranged weapons require us to choose one target which will be attacked. I have shown you also the monster miniatures, but one thing deserves also to be mentioned is the fact that we get some standees for those monsters, and those standees help us to track, for instance, health of those monsters, because we can give those monsters damage tokens in such a way that it is stuck into the stand. So this is a nice addition, something which helps during gameplay. It's much easier to track things, and it's also much easier to keep things in order on the playing area. Now, how a turn or how a game of Deep Madness looks like, what are its basic elements? The first thing, after preparing the scenario and setting the turn track, setting also the order of the adventurers and of the monsters, will be to play through an entire round. Now, we have only 4 rounds in this game. The first one is the Devour phase, then the Spawn phase, the Activation phase, and the Refresh phase. The Devour phase is a phase during which those chambers which we can see can change status, because Some of them, as you can see, are normal chambers, normal corridors, which are the ones how the facility looked like before the terrible things happened in Kadath. So we get normal corridors, we get normal walls, hatches, etc. But on the other side of each such a tile, we get the devoured side, where, as you can see, we have some terrifying elements such as flesh, blood, meat, and all terrifying elements. And those chambers can change status during the game, during the devour phase. During the devour phase, we will draw one card from the room deck, and this card will indicate the tile which will be devoured during this turn. So if we draw chamber 21, this is this chamber, we will have to change its status at this point. Changing a status means we take everything that was on such a room, we flip it to the devoured side, we put everything back on the room. Additionally, we place a spawn token, which will be the source through which new monsters will come on the board, and we add also one devour token, as I said earlier, which will have negative impact on us if we end movement on such and our activation on such a space. After the devour phase, we will be spawning new monsters, and at that point we will be drawing new cards from the monsters deck, which is created at the game's start by putting into it all the cards associated to the monsters which are set on the activation track. Now, on the turn track, we also have some numbers next to the turn played, and those numbers indicate the number of spawn cards which have to be resolved during a turn. So, for instance, here we will have to resolve 3 spawn cards. So I will have to draw 3 cards from the spawn from the monsters deck. Such a card will indicate the type of monster and the number of monsters spawned. 3 Hysterias will be spawned on the top card of the devoured deck, so in chamber 21, which was devoured during this turn. So I would put 3 Hysterias on the spawn location of chamber 21. But that's not it, that's not everything. After doing so, I would have to turn 2 additional monster cards. The room 21 would be put to the bottom of the deck, and the second card would be a putrid, which would be put in chamber 1. Then, for the third card, I would have to put 1 delirium in chamber 12 and 1 more delirium in chamber 20, after which the card would be put to the devoured deck bottom. So additional monsters will be placed in different locations, and this will not be easy to counter them. We will have to face some of them in order to accomplish our mission. Now, facing those opponents will happen during the third phase, which is the activation phase. During the activation phase, each adventurer, each player will be able to act. The monsters and the investigators will be activated alternatively in accordance to their order. We always activate the monster Mind Eater first, so at this point we would have to search for each Mind Eater on the playing area. Those are the small spider-like monsters, and we would have to activate each and every of them one after the other. What will they be doing during their activation? Well, monsters will act in accordance to what is written on their card. So, for instance, the Mind Eater would move, then move again and attack. A monster attacks us if it is on our spot, or in the case of some monsters, if we are in their range. They automatically inflict us a certain number of damage unless we can block this damage rolling dice and obtaining success results. After taking damage, we end the activation of such a monster, but some of them have also some special abilities which are activated during their turns. For instance, Blind has a sequence of move, attack, special. So after moving, attacking, we verify the special thing that such a monster does, etc. After a monster ends its activation, after all the monsters of a species of a kind end their activation, the counter will change to the first investigator. This investigator will act, then the husk monsters will be activated, and so on. So the activations will be in the order, will be alternatively between investigators and monsters. What an investigator can do during his activation? Normally, if we play 6 investigators, we have 3 actions each. But if we play smaller games, for instance with 4 investigators, we can have 4 or even 5 actions to make. Now those actions are also very well described on the player aid cards, and those activations are pretty simple. The first one is moving. At the expense of 1 activation, we can move 1 space. Moving is possible from space to space. If we are on big tiles, it will be from location to location, or sometimes we will be crossing tiles through hatches. Hatches can have one of 3 statuses. It can be an open hatch, which enables us to move, but it also enables movement to all the monsters. A hatch can be closed. In that case, we still can cross such a hatch. Monsters still can cross such a hatch, but the line of sight between the 2 spaces is closed. The third status of a hatch is a locked hatch, and to indicate such a status, we will be using the locked hatch token with the stand. Why do we lock hatches? Well, we lock them because when a hatch is locked, we can pass through it by opening it and then locking it once more, but the monsters cannot cross a locked hatch unless they break such a lock. We can try to forbid them crossing a locked hatch by rolling 2 dice, and if we obtain a success, a number of successes which is superior to the horror of the monster trying to pass, we will be still able to block such a movement. A very useful thing if we want to block the passage to some monsters. But normally we can just move along those connections. If there is no standing hatch, it means that the connection is possible between locations. We still have to take into consideration the fact that some locations will be flooded, and in that case we'll have to be expending oxygen for each action made in such a location. Apart from movement, we can attack. We can attack both the monsters which are on our place. We can also attack monsters in the range of our weapons. In contrast to many skirmish games, to many dungeon crawler games, we cannot fight if we do not have any weapon which allows us to fight. So we have to gather equipment in order to obtain such weapons. An attack is also very simple, as I explained earlier. We are rolling a certain number of dice and we have to obtain the result indicated on the card in order to inflict a certain number of damage. Each monster has a resistance which reduces the number of damage and a health which indicates how much damage it has to be inflicted in order to be killed. What is very useful in the game and what is a very important element of the game is using rerolls, because if we get a bad die roll, we can take a sanity counter and reroll the die. Those sanity counters are placed on our character cards, and we can accumulate at most the number indicated on our character's card. So for instance, Samuel Smith can have 3 of them, and Felicia Armitage can have 3 of them as well, but Randy Carter can have 5 of them. If we have sanity counters on our character card, and if we manage to kill a monster, those sanity counters will
be flipped over to their backside, which is the madness side. And accumulating madness, as you might expect, is not a very good idea, because if we gather 3 such tokens, we will have to draw a madness card from the deck, and those cards, as I said earlier, are not very good. So rerolls are possible, but each time we make such a reroll, we will have to draw and place such a token on our card. If we have such cards while killing a monster, we do not receive a reward in the form of a consciousness card. If I manage to kill a monster without having such tokens, I can receive an additional bonus, which is always nice because it enables me, for instance, to recover health or lose some madness. So those actions can be made multiple times. I can move twice or 3 times. I can attack 2 or 3 times in a row in order to kill a big monster. The only action which cannot be taken more than once is searching. Searching is possible only once in one location, and we just draw a card from the search deck and we find new equipment. I can have not more than 4 pieces of equipment. If I get more, I can still trade this equipment with my fellow investigators. I can also rest in order to get rid of those sanity counters. If I rest, I just remove all the sanity counters from my character's card. Finally, I can lock, unlock, reset hatches, as I said earlier, or make some component actions which are specified in the scenario description. For instance, here such an action would be to find a clue or to take a clue token. So those actions will depend also on the scenario. We end our activations, then we move the counter to the next monster, then it will return to a blank card or to a monster, then to the next investigator, and so on until the turn ends. At that point, we reset the cards which were one-time effects, which can be used only once during a turn. We will move the counter to the next turn, and we will replay a new turn in the same way that we did before. So the game is really pretty straightforward. It is very dynamic and quite quick, unless we really spend a lot of time thinking about what to do, because the number of options is quite large. Now, those are the basic ideas, the basic elements of Deep Madness. I do not want to spend more time to explain how the game works, because there are many over details which I could explain, such as paralyzed tokens, additional tokens, but I would rather like now to pass to a conclusion, and I would like to give you my thoughts about this game, what I think are its strong and a little bit weaker points.
Deep Madness is a game which attracted the attention of many gamers who decided to back this project because of 2 main reasons. The first one was its climatic setting, the story which it's supposed to tell us. The second was the quality of the components which were to be enclosed in this big box with this title. And judging Deep Madness based on those 2 assumptions, that the game would be a sci-fi horror game with high quality components, I must say that both statements are true. So the first strong point of Deep Madness will be without any doubt the quality of what you get. During this review I have shown you only the content of the core box, but keep in mind that you still get also additional elements which are part of the expansions. I will be showing you also on Wojennik TV, but today I would like to concentrate solely on the core game. And even looking at this box, you just have the impression that you receive something of a very high quality. I like the miniatures, I like the artwork which is used on the cards, I like the artwork of the playing tiles, I believe that all the components are really top notch. A small exception would be the madness tokens, not the madness tokens, the spawn tokens, or the small tokens, the devoured counters, which are placed on the map tiles. Those, in my opinion, are too similar one to another and too small to be distincted in an easy way. Those elements were changed thanks to additional components unlocked during the Kickstarter campaign. So as far as I know, for instance, the spawn tokens can be replaced by elements in the Uncounted Horrors box. I will be showing you this expansion also on Wojennik TV. But judging only the core game, I believe that using those elements will sometimes require you to very closely look at the game board, and sometimes it will be confusing. Apart from that, I have absolutely no problem with any of the other components. They are really terrific. As I said, I really like the miniatures, and I also very like the artwork. The second aspect is the climate of this game, because this was supposed to be a sci-fi horror game. Is it? In my opinion, it is. It is absolutely one of the most climatic games that I have played during the recent years. This is a game which really tries to tell you a story. It has a fantastic narrative, it has a great setting, a very interesting, a very original setting, which is something difficult to achieve when you try to create a new dungeon crawler, because this is such a huge family of games. Type of games in which you very often expect what you will receive. But I believe that Deep Madness is a game which can surprise you in many ways. So this setting, which is created both by the high quality components which I described a few words ago, but also by the story that the game tells, thanks to all the text which is inside the scenarios, which is on additional cards, which is on the madness or consciousness cards. All those elements increase this climate, increase this terrific journey that you will be taking while playing Deep Madness. When I judge a game, I of course not only judge it based on its external appearance, I also judge it based on the mechanics and how Deep Madness looks in this aspect. I would say that we have a lot of interesting ideas in this game. I already said that in many dungeon crawlers you know what to expect. In Deep Madness, very often you will be surprised, because your first feeling while playing a dungeon crawler is that you should instantly eliminate everything that comes in front of your pack, which appears in a corridor, which appears in a tunnel. Sometimes you will try to question such an entity, such a person, but very often you will just grab your weapon and try to kill it very fast in order to get rid of it. In Deep Madness, killing opponents is not a way to win. And this might be surprising, but this is how the game works. You do not win by slaying all the monsters. It's just impossible. You can kill some of them, but more will appear because they spawn very quickly. In order to win, you have to achieve the scenario objectives, which are very diverse. You will have to acquire some clues and transfer them to one of the rooms. You will have to take a shuttle, you will have to escort somebody, you will have to take care of monsters in a specific part of the underground facility. So the objectives will be very different, and each time, each scenario will be very different from the other. I like it a lot because it increases replayability. It also enables you to play scenarios with different objectives. Each time you will have a different pace of play, you will have also a different plan, you will be using different actions and different capabilities. I like it a lot. I like some small tweaks, some small ideas which were included in the game, which make it quite unique. The first one will be the sanity madness system, which at first enables you to reroll dice, which is always nice in dungeon crawler games, but secondly, which also forces you to keep the number of those counters at bay, because if you get too many of them, if they flip over to their madness side, you will have to grab madness cards, and those are pretty nasty. So I like this fact because you can control the randomness in some way, having some rerolls, but again you have to very carefully plan when and at what pace to use those rerolls, not to succumb to madness. I like this really a lot. The second very small tweak, but which makes all the difference, which I really like in Deep Madness, is the fact that each turn you will change the order of activations. In some games you have a very strict turn order sequence in which you know that characters will be activated for the entire game. Here you first of all have this alternate activation system in which a character is being activated, then a monster, then again a character, then again a monster. But additionally, you will change the order of the activation of the characters each turn. So you can be first, but then you are last. And you always have to keep that in mind, because in Deep Madness you will really carefully have to plan ahead. You will really carefully have to take a closer look at all the monsters in this file and what their capabilities, what their possibilities during following moves will be. You can be entrapped in a room because you didn't anticipate that a monster will group with another monster near the entrance to this room, and that their trap will be higher than your escape. Or sometimes you will be attacked by a monster which range is higher than 0. So even when you are safe in a room, you always have to carefully look at the turn order to see if this safety will not be changed into a state of danger in a few moves. I like it also a lot. So as I said earlier, a great diversity of scenarios, a great diversity of decisions to take. At the same time, I like the fact that the characters that you receive in this core game are also very different. You get only 6 of them, additional ones are in expansions, but all of them are quite unique. All of them have special abilities, all of them also have different synergies with one another. Some work well together, some less. So this is also a game in which very often you will have to choose how to split your team. Staying together will not always be the best option, and sometimes in order not to lose too much time you will split your team, and deciding who goes with whom will always be also a crucial decision to take, because as I said, some characters work well with others while not as good with others. So this is also an interesting aspect of the game. You have to carefully decide when to split your team and how to split your team. I like also the fact that although the game rules, the mechanics are quite simple, you get a ton of decisions, you get a lot of different actions, and at the same time you will always use all of them during a game. I know dungeon crawlers in which you just move, shoot, move, shoot, move, shoot, heal, move, shoot, pick an item and end the game. Here you will have to carefully choose when to move, when to fight, when to rest, when to close a hatch, when to open a hatch, etc. You have all those actions which are very useful, and you always take into consideration using all of them, because all of them are very attractive. What I really like is that the rules are very well written. As I said, the rules are not very complicated, the mechanics are not very complicated, and This is also thanks to very well written rules. The rulebook is excellent. You have some examples. It is very easy to learn how to play Deep Madness, and even if you have some questions or some doubts, most of them will be answered in the rulebook. It is one of the best rulebooks that I have read during the recent months. What I really think is also a strong point of Deep Madness is the fact that this game has a huge potential to be further developed. This was already a fact during the Kickstarter campaign, because the additional components, the additional scenarios, miniatures, elements were all a true evidence that this game could be even more developed, even more enhanced thanks to additional elements, and it is still valid. You can still imagine additional scenarios, additional component, which will very well suit the core game. So this is also a game in which this modular aspect, the way that you are adding some additional components, is a proof of the game being very plastic, in the way that you can tailor some things up to your own needs. So what I think are the weaker points of Deep Madness? I have already said a few words about the small counters. I won't be repeating that. What I think which deserves to be mentioned is the fact that setting the game, then storing the game and playing the game needs a lot of time and a lot of space. Now the time of play is somewhere between 90 and 180 minutes or so, but you always have to take into consideration that you will also spend 15 to 25 minutes preparing the scenario. There is a ton of elements that you will have to search for, place on your table, shuffle cards, prepare tokens, return tiles, etc. A lot of things to do, and all those things will have to be stored in the game box afterwards. So it is also 15 or 20 minutes in order to replace all those miniatures in the box. Additionally, the game takes a lot of place, so you have to have a big table in order to store everything and to be comfortable, and not to place all the things one next to the other. Otherwise, it will not be very pleasant to play. When I told you that I like the Sanity Madness system and this possibility of rerolling die rolls, I said that I like the fact that the game enables us to control in some way the randomness. But still, playing this game, sometimes you will feel very random events influencing gameplay. And for instance, the order in which the rooms will be devoured, the type of monsters which will spawn in those rooms, can have a huge impact on gameplay. If you have one ravenous in front of you or one putrid, makes really a great difference. If the room in which you want to move next turn gets a spawn counter or not, makes a huge difference. At the same time, if you get really unlucky, and even with the rerolls, if you cannot inflict this last wound that you need to destroy a monster blocking your way, you might feel that the game sometimes is random. And it always will be, because this is a game. This is a game in which some randomness is an intrinsic element of it. But I believe that this randomness is not that huge as in some other games. Of course, it can influence gameplay, and it will influence gameplay from time to time, but it is at a level which I personally accept. The last thing is that while playing this game, as I said at the beginning, that this game tries to tell us a story, and it really does. I felt it during my plays. But you do not have any campaign mode. You play the scenarios one after the other, but without any connection, in the way that you cannot take your investigator that you played with what you gathered, so with your equipment, with your experience that you had, and play the next scenario having already this. Those scenarios are connected one to the other in the way that you learn the story of what happened to Kadath, what is your destiny in this place, but this is not really a campaign. This is a story consisting of 8 separate scenarios. Of course, the story is in some way connected because you end scenario 1 and then the history, the description describes you what you will do next. But you can play scenario 2 having different investigators, different team, and having no connection with your first team. I'd really like if the game offered also a campaign mode which would allow you to play all the 8 scenarios using one core team, having common equipment, having some experience points or something like that. It would increase even further this immersion, and it would enable you to even more feel inside, being inside of this story. Having said that, I believe that this is also a strong point of Deep Madness, because the fact that all those scenarios are not connected in the mechanical type, in the mechanical aspect one to the other, enables you to play, for instance, scenario 7 after playing scenario 1, or beginning to discover Deep Madness by playing scenario 4. It's absolutely possible. So, not a minus, it's something that personally, in my opinion, would further enhance the gaming experience. Concluding, Deep Madness is a fantastic game with high quality components, a game with a great, interesting, dark climate, a game which is extremely good also for solitaire play as well as for cooperative play, a game in which you will have a ton of decisions to take, a game with interesting mechanics, with some small minor issues which I believe are even not worth to underline during this conclusion. If you have the opportunity, you should definitely try Deep Madness, because in my opinion it is one of the best dungeon crawlers ever published. This was the review of Deep Madness from Diemension Games. I wish you a fantastic day, at the same time also inviting you to take a look at our other videos and at our Facebook and Instagram account. See you next time.